This is one of two Fender Deluxe Reverb 68 Customs that I'm gutting and rebuilding properly. Both amps are having the exact same things done to them at the same time. So I'm just going to show one amp per video just for reduced confusion. So everything's out and the newly populated board is here. And let's see, it's going to go about like that. Got the standoff holes already transferred to the chassis on both of them, and both boards are populated. I went with turret strips rather than eyelets, because when you have a fiberglass board like this and there's no backer board, solder can drip down with an eyelet, and these turrets just make it a little bit neater to work with. There's a little bit of separation between the top side and the bottom side, so you can heat up something to solder up top without this bottom stuff coming undone if you're working fast and hot. You'll notice this is not the traditional Fender layout. I've got the tone stack circuit stuff moved closer to the tone stack pots. That reduces the number of AC wires, so I'm not bringing a whole bunch of AC wiring here, 3 of them in the case of the traditional Fender. I'm bringing 1 DC wire to here, and then the 3 AC have a shorter length. As in other recent builds I've done, I'm not using big axial electrolytic caps. I'm using radial caps, and when they're mounted on their side, they work very well with a turret board or eyelet board construction. And these are higher quality than any axial electrolytics on the market. And as axials are being phased out by all manufacturers, in 10, 15, 20 years when this amp needs to be recapped, there will be capacitors available on the market which will fit. I don't think that the radials are going to go away anytime soon, even as everything else in the industry is going to surface mount. There are no huge orange drops. I've got these Panasonic ECQs, which are really nice, good sounding, low mass polyester film caps, similar in construction to the 418 series or 600 series or the 225p series. Orange drops are used as a catch-all term. The most commonly used orange drops in Fenders that people use are the 715p and 716p series, which are polypropylene as opposed to polyester. The old Blue Ajax caps in Fender were polyester, and these sound more like that, though the difference is kind of minimal between a polyester and polypropylene. These will sound just as good as a great big orange drop with their lower mass. And with the turret board construction, I didn't want to have a big honking thing suspended up in the air to vibrate and cause stress. Similarly, instead of the big ceramic discs that Fender used in the LFO, which tend to fail, or big film caps, which don't need to be there, I've got some really nice multi-layer dipped ceramics here, 1 kilovolt in the LFO, and they should never fail. 2 things are probably going to get changed. I misordered these 470 ohm resistors here. These are half watt, the same as the others. They're just not rated for as much of a voltage drop as the others, and so in my next order I will replace those. I just misordered. There was a 1-digit difference and I didn't catch that, and I need to, because I need to have a better. These are fine. These would probably work just fine in this. I just like knowing that I've got a 350 volt or 400 volt voltage drop rated resistor rather than a 200 volt or 250 volt, whatever this is. The voltage drop here and the voltage drop here is nowhere near the rating even of this tiny thing. It's almost a visual thing. They may make it. I'll see. But on my project parts list for this amp, that part is getting changed out because I was not expecting the small one there. I may actually go to that series on the BOM for these resistors here in the LFO where I've got this short span. I think it might be better to have the physically smaller resistor there, and there's just almost no current there whatsoever, so it's kind of a no-brainer. Anyway, I'm just kind of talking about that. These are the things that occur to me as a designer and builder, things to make the next one a little bit easier. Similarly, on these cathode bypass caps. On the Excalibur 15, I mounted them down against the board, and on this one I did them upright because of the spacing available right in this area and this area. I think next ones will be down against the board. It just makes everything topside easier to work with. So just because I'm good at something doesn't mean I can't improve it. So I try to get better with every amp I build, and the next one will be a little bit easier. Some of that doesn't make any difference to the player or the sound, but 5 minutes per solder connection versus 1 minute per solder connection can add up in an amp with a lot of this stuff. Now, in the previous little video on this series, I said I'd plan to retain the built-in preamp tube sockets and the existing heater wiring from Fender. Well, I don't know whether Fender you spec'd out a cheaper tube socket from Belton than the ones that are commercially available, or whether they had just really heated it up too much in the initial soldering run. But when I went to desolder, get the old solder and old bits of lead off, a couple of the pins just melted right down into the tube sockets, just sank down. The plastic got too soft. So that's on me, maybe. I don't know. I don't know whether it's a mistake I made or whether it's just a crappier Belton socket than I expected. But as the good quality Belton sockets are $2 each in bulk, I'm just ordering new ones and I'll redo the heater wiring. Now, here in the output tube sockets, I was able to get all the old stuff off. And there's a phenolic socket I prefer, but these ceramics are fine in here. There's a Belton socket I really love, but it doesn't quite fit the opening very well. And I'm going to replace these screws, which go directly into the chassis, with some screws with nuts, which allow me to put some grounding tabs in here for the output tube cathodes. Fender had them going to the board, and I could have them going to the board to the screen ground, which would be, theoretically an improvement. But there's so little current on the cathode of these things. It's a ground point. All the current is very low. I'm just going to do it here for a very short path and have fewer wires going everywhere in the amp for clutter. It doesn't make any difference if it goes to ground here or over where all the screen and phase inverter grounds will actually be made. There are going to be fewer grounded chassis connections in this amp than there are in a traditional Fender build, but more than just the one that some star grounding proponents would advise. Star grounding is a whole other can of worms I'll get into in some other video. Next up, besides putting in the hardware for the octal output tube sockets, I'm going to redo the wiring on the rectifier tube sockets, because that's just a little bit of clutter, and I like to have everything short and neat and clean, and I will show that in just a moment. I'm also going to be replacing the screws which go into the chassis that hold the transformers in place with some screws which actually have Kep's nuts or nylock nuts, because it gives a more secure connection down the road. And while I have everything available, I will be able to do that very easily. Let's see, here is the second of the two boards. You can see they are exactly the same. In fact, these amps are going to be exactly the same, but I do have the owner's names written on a piece of tape on the other side, so each one will get back the serial number they sent in. Though the amps should be exactly identical when they go out. Once I get the octal sockets cleaned up here on the rectifier and get in those grounding lugs for the output sockets, then I can go ahead and reattach the output transformer and choke and reverb transformers, mounting with real hardware, as I mentioned. And then I can put the pots in place here, which will allow me to do preliminary wiring on the bottom of the board, where it's going to go to the tube sockets and to the pots and jacks on the front. And I'll be able to do the input jacks and their shielded wiring to V1 and V2. And when I put those pots on, I can reattach this front panel. And both of the front panels had this little dip in the corner. And that happens a lot on the Fender reissues. For some reason, especially on the silver panel ones. It's because the chassis does not fully extend the whole width of this. This has a little lip that hangs down, and it likes to bend where that lip is. And on the other one, which is across the room and I can't easily get to right now, I was able to clamp out that bend, and I will do the same thing to this one before I reattach it to the chassis, so that the thing will look brand new in every aspect from the outside, at least from the front. It'll be brand new in many senses of the word. All right, both amps now are at this stage where they have real mounting hardware and the ground lugs there on the octal sockets, and very much shortened and neatened up rectifier tube wiring. The transformers are all mounted with real hardware now. That front panel corner is almost perfect. I think I can clamp it a little bit better than that still, but it's a lot better than it was. I'm ready to put in the pots and the lamp and the rear power switches and output jacks in prep for wiring everything up. The new sockets should be here tomorrow, and I've got to go to the hardware store. These holes that need rubber grommets instead of those ugly plastic through-hole things are 7/16 of an inch. I stock 3/8 and 1/2 an inch, which are the much more common values people use. Fender apparently decided to go rogue with some 7/16 inch stuff, but I can get that. But I definitely want some good grommets in all the through holes for the wires. But this thing is going to be so pretty so soon. And of course, on the reissues, both the 65 and the 68, these holes are too small for real pots. So I've got to enlarge them to 3/8. Always fun doing this with steel. And of course, I've got to do the same thing to the holes in the panel. And I do 2 of them freehand, so that I can transfer that to the chassis and have 2 pots hold them in place, that I can do everything at once with it up on there. So I've got the intensity, and then I'll do this first volume. What a horrible sound. But that will be enough for me to mount this and have the pots hold it in place, and everything will line up. And subsequent ones that get opened up will open up the panel and the chassis holes at the same time. So I'll report back in a bit. This is going to get loud. All right, new pots in place. Notice there are varying distances from the chassis because they have different bushing lengths, and I want all the knobs to fit flush, so let me test that next. All right, combination of brass and different metals. I got some CTS J tapers, some alphas, and this nylon on that 3 meg reverse audio. Let's see how the pots go in terms of the shaft dimensions being slightly different. Okay, they're all slightly different distances from the chassis, and some of the knobs want to touch the chassis. So I'll take this 1mm pick. It's hard to do this one-handed. Well, I can't do it one-handed apparently. Anyway, I will position the pick between the chassis and the knobs, and then screw the knobs down so they will all be a consistent height off the chassis, which will keep the knobs from wearing through the finish of the chassis. Just little touches like that are nice. Actually, it's a 1.14, even better. You know, for jazz, you want to use a 1.5. For maybe for surf, like a 0.88. I'm kidding. All right, all the pots and knobs are in place, and all the knobs are equidistant from the panel. I'll give them a little bit of a clean later. I do the other one, but it is late on a Friday afternoon. I've got the kids coming, and I need to get dinner plans and stuff. And I got a birthday to plan for my daughter and all kinds of stuff. So this is going to have to go away for a little bit, but not for very long. It's going to be pretty. Just a reminder. The really pretty stuff's going to be hidden on the inside because life is not fair, princess.